The latest bombshell against an elite Hollywood performer was leveled against Louis C.K. by the New York Times on Thursday. In its exposé, written by Melina Rysick, Cara Buckley, and Jodi Kantor, the Times charges that C.K. committed acts of sexual indecency against 5 women. Clearly the Times is attempting to place C.K. in the same boat of the damned with Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Kevin Spacey, Dustin Hoffman, and numerous other Hollywood men. And sadly, there does indeed appear to be a cult of testosterone plaguing Hollywood and maybe the nation, and it should be addressed. But is it fair to compare C.K. to the likes of Cosby and Weinstein? Cosby is accused of drugging dozens of unwilling women and forcing himself upon them, while Weinstein repeatedly sexually harassed women, exposed himself to them, and used his position as a studio head to demand sexual favors. The Times story on C.K. starts off by relating the shared experience of comedians Dana Min Goodman and Julia Wurlove, both of whom met C.K. at an Aspen Comedy Festival in 2002. C.K. invited them up to his hotel room, then asked if he could masturbate in front of them. The two replied with laughter and C.K. began removing his clothes. According to their own story, as told to the Times, the two continued to laugh as C.K. stripped naked and performed the sexual act upon himself. Creepy, yes. A crime, no. Could they have left? Well, there's no indication that they were prevented from doing so. Could they have said no to his advances? Again, there's no indication that they said no, and the laughter could easily have been construed as permission. Next, the Times recounts the story of Rebecca Corrie, who ran into C.K. when he appeared as a guest on a television pilot she was working on in 2005. She says that C.K. propositioned her in much the same way as Goodman and Wurlove, asking if they could go back to his dressing room and he could masturbate in front of her. She said no, and C.K. reacted by turning red and walking away. A perversion, certainly. A crime, I think not. Had he asked Ms. Corrie if she wanted to have sex, then walked away when she said no, would we think anything more of it than a man being a bit forward? Probably not. Another woman, who only spoke anonymously, told the Times that C.K. used to proposition her while both were working on the Chris Rock show 19,972,000. But again, the story is problematic, and not just because it's told anonymously. The woman admitted to the Times that she went along with C.K.'s requests and only questioned the appropriateness of it all later. Kevork Jan says Reuters again, no physical intimidation, no threats against her career, and no indication that he harassed her. We can argue about whether or not it was appropriate to engage in a sex act with a younger co-worker. She was in her 20s at the time while at work, but that's coming dangerously close to judging people by their sexual proclivities. The last accusation against C.K. involved writer Abby Schachner, who had called C.K. in 2003 about appearing on her show. Schachner says that she could hear C.K. masturbating on the other end of the line. The call went on for several minutes, the Times reports, even though, Ms. Schachner said, I definitely wasn't encouraging it. But she didn't know how to end it, either. Well, one way would have been to hang up. If C.K. called her repeatedly, say, or made advances against her despite her refusals, then I'd say it would be a pretty clear case of sexual harassment. But none of that happened. Altogether, the Times makes a pretty flimsy case against C.K. First off, the most recent incident they describe took place 12 years ago, and memories can be fuzzy after more than a decade. Secondly, in none of the cases do they show that C.K. made repeated advances after he was rejected. In fact, it seems quite the opposite. Nor does the Times article show that C.K. ever sought to derail the careers of the women he engaged with or physically tried to intimidate them. What we're left with is a pervert, perhaps, but not a criminal. Lapses of judgment, certainly, but nothing that should so far put C.K. in the same category as Weinstein, Cosby, or even our president, who proudly boasted about physically assaulting women. Should more emerge about C.K.'s conduct that shows him to have intimidated women for his own sexual gratification, then he should be rightly be pilloried at that point. But that still wouldn't excuse the poor journalism of the Times, which rushed to print an article that would lampoon a man's career before they actually had a sufficient case against him. Rosenfeld is a writer on Long Island.